I'm going to ask you to please do your Zoom speech that I'm sure you are tired of doing for how many times you've done this now.
Never get tired of it, Mayor. Happy to do so. Good evening, everyone. I'm City Administrator Greg Elliott. I'd like to address a few things before the mayor requests a roll call. This is the pre-meeting, which is a forum for the City Commission to discuss various issues and topics. For much of the meeting, we ask that participants mute themselves to allow the commissioners to have their discussions and to minimize any background noise that may be disruptive. An opportunity for public comment will be provided at the end of the meeting, and participants will be invited at that time to unmute and address the commission if they wish. We've talked in the past about Zoom bombing. This is where a virtual meeting is interrupted by people who fill the screen with objectionable content. If this occurs during our meeting tonight, we will disconnect the meeting and restart after a few minutes. Attendees can reconnect via the same link. We will also turn over the video of the meeting to law enforcement for investigation. Thank you all for participating. Mayor, I'll turn the meeting over to you for a roll call.
Robin, roll call, please.
Mayor Heath.
Present.
Commissioner Halt.
Present.
Commissioner Roberts.
Present.
Commissioner Watson.
Present.
Commissioner Strayer.
Present.
Commissioner Gauss.
Present.
Commissioner Castleberry.
Present.
All commission members present.
At this time, I will turn the meeting over to you, Greg.
Thank you, Mayor. So our first item is continuation of the discussion regarding the East Side Trail extension. As you'll recall, we ran out the clock on Mr. Slesarski last time, and he is here again tonight to pick up the story where we left off, which, as I recall, was at State Street. So, Mike, if you want to take it from there, explain to us what the issues are and what the budget issues are.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Okay. Excuse me. So basically where we're at is just want to give you a quick update, just a short one with regards to construction. Everything is moving along really well at this point. Obviously, when we started, when the contract was awarded, we had a little bit of issue with obtaining the information to move forward with the design. We have since obtained that information and the cooperation of the Adrian and Blissfield Railroad with substantial, let's just say, substantial discussions. But everything is moving forward well with those folks. And we have proceeded, and you may have noticed, we have already, since we started, we have excavated the pavement section from Main Street all the way to State Street. So, there's still a lot of work to be done, but I'm real happy at this point that we have the aggregate down, the aggregate base down in its setting. Actually, that helps to obtain compaction and density and that sort of thing. It doesn't hurt a bit to sit like that for a little while. The asphalt plants are still not open yet. They're the one that we use here in Adrian. So we're moving forward with that once that opens. The real issue at hand, the tricky part, has been Division Street, the section between State and Division Street. Early on, we knew that had the potential to have some issue with it, just due to the fact that if you stand at State Street and look to the east, you'll see that there's a lot of varying elevation. There were obstructions in that sort of thing. However, it was at the time, there was no way to know exactly where the easement was because it didn't have survey stakes out there to see that. But as we got into the design process and I obtained the survey for it, it was pretty clear what, according to our suspicions, that we are going to have a number of different issues. And most of it, if not all of it, is driven by the need to make the trail between State and Division Street ADA accessible. in which case there are certain maximum slopes that you're allowed to have with respect to that. And you have to sprinkle in some, landings every 30 feet, for people to rest or whatnot, and some to keep people from running away down the slope. So as I performed the design on it, I found that there was a significant cut into the hill right off of Division Street, and in which case, when holding the maximum slopes, it requires in order to, and you can't just follow the slope, you have to cut into it, but you have to have a wall of some sort holding back the existing ground so you can make your way through the hill. So what I have come up with, what we've come up with on our end is what I believe to be the lowest cost solution, and that would be the placement of 2 by 2 by 6 blocks along this portion of the corridor. It's probably about 250 some odd feet where it would be required on both sides of the trail. It would hold back the dirt on where the trail would cut through, and it would allow for ADA accessible slopes for the trail itself. A couple challenges with this, obviously, it's more involved than just cutting out a pavement section on existing ground and putting it there. There's a lot of more excavation work involved. And also the accessibility to construction equipment in that vicinity is particularly difficult because you're only working with a 20-foot easement that has a width of 20 feet. So by the time you do the math with a 2-foot block and a 10-foot path, you already have 14 of those feet eaten up, and then you only have a very short area, left within the easement to operate. So there's some challenges there, but it's difficult, not impossible. But what it would require is the other thing is it's very difficult in that circumstance to get an asphalt truck or paving equipment in there, just because of the extreme slopes, and also because it's just you have these block walls that would be there. The concern would be to displace those with the weight of the equipment. So that section would have to also be a concrete. I don't want to call it a sidewalk because it's more substantial than that. It would be I would call it a concrete pavement, but essentially it would look like a sidewalk that in that portion would go through that hill at Division Street, to Division Street. So when you look at it from that perspective, basically what we have is, when you break down the cost numbers, the original contract amount was $240,000. Within that contract, our work within that contract was $217,000, roughly $218,000. So there's about a $22,000 contingency already built into the contract. And I'm going to get a little bit more into the weeds with this right now. The state to division portion also had $20,000 built into it for some sort of treatment for the state division street section, because it was anticipated that would be an issue. It wasn't really known until we obtained the survey and then that we did the design that we knew the extent of the issue. So basically there's a $42,000 contingency total built into the contract. And so as I went further into the pricing of the wall itself and in the additions to do the work, first I took and peeled out the asphalt paving section, and then I added in the work for the concrete pavement and also the block wall. That amounts to right around $68,000. It's at $67,958 by my account. But there's another little layer that came up a couple weeks ago that has since come to some sort of resolution. Before we started, I got a phone call from, I received a phone call from the Adrian Blissfield Railroad to inform me that a flagger would be required for the entire project. And that came as a bit of a surprise to me, being that this is a dedicated easement to the city of Adrian. But I listened to what they had to say, and basically federal law says that if you're working within 50 feet of the rail, a railroad flagger shall be present. It wouldn't be enough for us to send one of our men or one of our workers to flag, pay attention and flag while we're working. And so as I did more investigation, the shock wasn't so much that a flagger was required, but the shock was more that the flagger would come at the expense of $150 an hour. So, which is right in the realm of what we charge for one of our excavators and an operator. So, as I had more discussions with the rail, and I don't want to say I negotiated with them, but I really was trying to get to the bottom of what they needed in order to have this project go forward. They had relented on no flagger being required for Main Street all the way to State Street, which I was glad for that, because by my calculation, my rough calculation, I figured that just having a flagger present for the entire job would run north of $50,000. So what they agreed to was, after I met with their general foreman, their superintendent, who's a great guy, he said, look, if you can just have a flagger present when you build the wall portion where it's in closer proximity to the rail, and they have utilities in there, some signal boxes and that sort of thing. That's what they're most concerned about. I was very understanding of that from the standpoint of it seemed much more reasonable. And I think that as the project goes and they see how we work, I think there's a chance to dial that back even. But one of the things I asked them if they would be able to do a reduced rate for that, and they said they would. Not $150 an hour, but they do $100 an hour. And they would reduce the number of days required for that. So the worst case scenario, I think, for a flagger would be right around, I think that portion of between state and division will probably take 180 hours. So simple math says that the max that we'll see from any flagging would be $18,000. So if you add that $18,000 in with the 67 or this, 67,958, we're looking at an additional for that division portion of 85,958. When you back out the contingencies, which is 42,000, the net change order amount above and beyond the 240,000 would be 43,685. So that's where we're at. It's a little bit of a journey to go through the numbers, and it gets a little bit confusing even for me sometimes. But that's where we're at with that, and it's probably about a 5,000 foot level view of what has happened to get us to this point.
Thanks, Mike. Commissioners, it's open for your discussion in terms of whether you're up for funding that additional amount.
Could somebody recap who's funding, like the general, what's already approved in terms of our funding versus private funding, just to kind of rewind a little bit?
As I recall, we approved 40,000 from the oil trust toward this project, and the rest was private donations.
And the scope of the project or the total cost of the project is what?
As Mike said, the contract amount was 240, which included about 20,000 of contingencies going from Main Street east to Division.
And so we missed on the estimate by 33% using rough numbers, and the city has to hold the bag, or we need to talk about who's going to make this additional investment?
Well, I think there's probably a few options. I mean, on the one hand, the project is constructible up through State Street within the budgeted amount. Beyond that, then yes, it's a discussion of whether the city would be willing to make up the difference, whether we would look to those other partners who had contributed previously, who I think were Kiwanis and the private donor, well, those would be the other two obvious options. And you know, we've talked about, I think at the last session, there are other competing trail-related demands for funds right now, which is why this is not an optimal time to be trying to raise more money to complete this project.
So I think there's some, you know, realistic expectation that we continue to share in some of the costs. I think the spirit of this project is to connect over to the other side of Division in some capacity. And so if we stop at State, project doesn't really have the identity that was expected. So, you know, I think that we do have some responsibility to take this project to completion, knowing that any construction project has these overages. I'm disappointed in the size and the magnitude of this overage, but that's kind of how it is. But in the same right, I don't think that we hold the responsibility 100% to fund this.
I guess I'll chime in here. From the DDA's perspective, or not, I'm sorry, Kiwanis, Chairman Steele sent an email out saying that Kiwanis was not in support of kicking in any more money for that project. I guess it's one of those things where, you know, this is a public-private partnership, and we are, you know, partnering with some private dollars here, and it's one of those things where connecting to the east side, I think, is important. You know, when it comes to a quality of life component, like Commissioner Watson said, I think that the magnitude of the difference in the scope of the project's a little concerning, but I would hate to have the project just stop and not continue, especially when there's so much private investment, because I think that's the way we're going to continue to go in the right direction, is just partnering with the private investors in our community that are willing to donate and invest in the city when it comes to projects like this. So I know Kiwanis is not going to be, because I did receive an email, I can't remember when, but they went to their board and they're not interested in providing any more money. So I guess, Commissioner Watson, to answer your question, I think it's more so we go to the private dollar, or I'm sorry, the private investors, or we take the responsibility to finish the project. So I guess that's where we're at with that. So, and I don't know if Greg got that same email. I believe he was on it, if I'm not mistaken. So, but I would like to see the project be finished. Like I said, it's unfortunate that it's a big number, but again, it's one of those things where, you know, to connect our east side residents with this quality of life item, I think is important. So
It's a big number and it exhausts our contingency. So, I mean, Mike, what's your level of comfort that we won't have any additional expense above and beyond this?
Well, in terms of the actual construction of the path, I feel very confident with the solution to meet the ADA compliance in the block wall installation. The only other unknowns, and I've done everything I can to rule this out, is the existence of the rail utilities in proximity to the wall. If my indication from their utilities manager is that there are no utilities that proceed from their signal cases north across the path. However, I have enough experience in the business to know that people's memories fade over time, and history is sometimes an elusive thing, and the only way to really know is to go forth with the excavation, and sometimes you find things that you're not aware of, and sometimes you'll find some utilities that aren't picked up by the MISTIG system, and in this case that would be for the rail, and there would be no other what there may be that may just pop up that we're not aware of. I don't anticipate that, but I can't rule that out as an issue that there might be some utility crossing it. But all of my due diligence has indicated to me that that is not the case. But the only way to really know is to dig it up. That would be about the only other thing that I can think of right at this point that could come up.
It's definitely a hard number to swallow, hearing that we had that much contingency and we're going to be, still needing almost, well, actually more than what that contingency even had built in. But I agree with Commissioner Halt and Commissioner Watson. At first in my brain, when you were talking about it 2 weeks ago, I'm like, well, we just might have to stop at State Street. Like, I was thinking that. And the more I thought about it for the last 2 weeks, I just don't feel comfortable with that. The original plan was to go to division. I feel like it needs to go to division. It's a hard pill to swallow. I'm hoping there's not going to be, like you said, any more surprises, but I would like to see some other investments so we're not, shouldering that alone. But I do think it needs to go all the way to division to be completed. I agree.
Can I chime in here and say that I think it needs to go to division also, because once you get to division, we already have a bike path that runs down Division Street, which not only can take you to the north to Boys and Girls Club, but it can take you to the south down to Myers and some other shopping areas. So it just is a better fit to get all the way to division.
Can I just add one other point? The 18,000 that I have in there, I believe to represent a worst case scenario in terms of the flagging. So one of the things that I am going to work with the rail folks with is to see any way that we can drive that down as much as possible. That could be half of that, but it all depends on who we happen to have work out there and what the dynamics are. So far, I've done my best to work with them and keep them apprised of what's going on. And I'm hopeful that they've taken observation of how we conduct our work, and it will give them some comfort level once we get moving forward with this this more substantial portion between state and division, and then it will reduce the amount of time that their flagger would be needed.
And I want to say thank you, Mike, for all the hard work you've already put in with trying to get those costs reduced already as it is, and your commitment to working with the railroad to make it the best case scenario for us. So thank you.
So playing devil's advocate, I'm not for or against it at this point. I just discussion here. If we ended at State Street and saved that $44,000, I'm looking at a map of Adrian, so it looks like State Street going over to Berry would be a pretty good alternative. They're very close together through there. Is that $44,000 something we can save and put towards I forget what it's called, but the entrance way, like an arch, a trailhead, a trailhead area instead. Because just based on what I see on the map, State would be a short distance right over to Berry, right up to Division. Throwing it out there as an alternative.
I'm not sure I'm catching what you're saying, Mary. Isn't the path pretty much going along Berry? Isn't that where the railroad tracks are? Or am I incorrect on that? I mean, we
It's
don't,
on the other side. So Berry, yes. So Berry comes along the railroad tracks on the south side, right? It would be? Yes. And the trail, from what I remember from the walking it last year with you, Mike, is, and what I've seen, I took a drive through there. It's on the north side of the railroad track, correct? Or am I backwards on my map?
That's right.
That's right.
That's
Okay.
correct. It's on the north side.
so we need to get from one side of the tracks to the other side, and that's via State Street,
Right.
to Berry, or Berry to State Street. I'm sure. Okay,
Right. On State Street to Berry Street. Correct.
thank you.
Oh, I'm late. So just an option. I don't know if we can use that money to do something nice, as a trailhead. I don't know what else to call it, a trailhead right there instead.
So Mary, where is the trailhead going to be at then? At State Street? If you did that?
Lad, I couldn't hardly hear you. Is that just me or is it?
If we did what you're talking about, the trail itself would end at State Street. You're saying cross over the tracks and ride down Berry Street to Division. So where do you want that trailhead to be?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know.
I also don't think there's much room for a trailhead at State Street. I could be wrong. I don't know how much room we would need, but there's houses pretty close to the trail right there. But
About all you could do would be an arch like, we have at Main Street right now.
Yeah,
That
the
would-
arch like it is on 52 right there. That's all I'm thinking, not like a significant trailhead like Ben Oak trailhead, just, an entranceway arch. So, no, but that's a really good point, Lad. It may not look the best and people may not be able to find it there without very good directions to it.
Yeah, I'm more in favor of making the investment as little as I want to make the investment than stopping it short. Division's a busy road. And to Lad's point, something near and dear to my heart, the Boys and Girls Club is a half block closer down there at Berry. You're not going up and down that hill on Division. And much of this action is for ADA compliance. And so, it's a bitter pill, but the flagger component of it is a bit of a stinger for me too, because we all know the federal government and the railroad didn't just come up with that in the last couple of months. I mean, that one's probably been in place for 1,000 years, but it is what it is. And I mean, oh boy, yeah, it's it's like painting half your house or something like that. It just doesn't look right. And we need to probably step up and just make the investment.
Do we have parking there? Can you refresh my memory, Greg? Do we have like a parking area there? Do we own land there at Division? So like if people wanted to start the trail there or anything?
There's hardly enough space for our trail right there. I mean, it's tight.
That's what I
where the-
thought. Okay.
Right, no, we don't. And I mean, as you may recall, when we walked the route last year, we parked at Big C Lumber's parking lot.
Yep.
But
Okay.
it's really the only option down there.
I agree with Mr. Watson. I just, if the intended purpose of doing the thing in the first place was to get it deeper into the east side, get it closer to the Boys and Girls Club, this doesn't accomplish. Stopping at State Street is, who's even going to look for a trailhead at State Street? I mean, that's not where I would look to begin the trail. Division is, a busier street. People are going to see it if we put a trailhead there. The issue of parking is an issue, but there's parking by the Boys and Girls Club. If that's going to be a starting point, you could park there and ride your bike over to the trail. So I don't know. I think we should make the investment too, but that's just me.
Well, if that's the consensus, we can bring back a contract amendment and the budget amendment and make that happen at your next meeting. More on that? Okay, Mike, you work with Matt and get him the exact number and what we need to do as it relates to budget amendment and try to get that on the next agenda. Okay, moving on. The next item is food trucks again. What we did this time is we put the whole draft ordinance. This has actually been sitting around here in City Hall since not last January, a year ago, January 2020. We're just getting inundated at this point by requests for food trucks at various events and private gatherings as well. And I wanted to get this in front of you, show you what it looked like, have a sufficient discussion, hopefully at tonight's pre-meeting, so that we're comfortable putting it on a future agenda for first reading and introduction. And there's two components to it. There's on the one hand, a new ordinance, which essentially provides authority to have food trucks on public property. It doesn't define where that would be. That would be left for you to establish by resolution at a later date. So you'd put a map together that would demonstrate where those could be. We put some ideas in your packet. One is a map that shows citywide view, so where the parks would be. I think our discussion last time was that everybody felt pretty comfortable with allowing it in the parks. Obviously, the place we are getting the interest in having them is not the parks, it's downtown for the most part, it's downtown. And so the other option that occurs to me is some part of the municipal parking lots, which are not on the street in front of businesses, but back behind where they're less competitive. Maybe a subset of that option would be simply the farmer's market parking lot if you wanted to do a trial approach to allow them only there. Like I say, the map will be established if we go this route by resolution, and so it can be changed very easily as your experience dictates going forward. And then the other piece of that, and there's just a very short blurb in there of language that would be added to the zoning ordinance to allow for them on private property where there is available place for them to park. And that would not involve a permit in the same fashion necessarily, but the main piece is the city property piece. That's where we're getting I take that back. It's not the only place where we're getting interest, and we have some out there right now operating without approval, sometimes on city property, but more particularly on private property. And we don't want to thwart that. It can be a good driver of activity in the community. So we're just trying to hold off and get something in place that addresses it before we take any kind of enforcement action. So that's, I don't know if you've had a chance to look through the draft ordinance. As I think I mentioned when we talked about it previously, this is based on Traverse City's ordinance, which is kind of elegantly simple, not very cumbersome in terms of administering it. One question which I highlighted in the draft ordinance is related to whether we would allow such vendors to serve alcohol. My suggestion would be that given our Dara district, we probably don't want to do that. But, there was language about that in the draft ordinance, which we would have to call out if you were not in favor of that and wanted to move forward. So open that up for discussion.
I guess, Greg, one question I have is, like, what has been in place? That's where there seems to be confusion leading into this. Because I know at one point we were allowing it, because I know for a fact that it happened in our first Friday in December of 2019. You know, obviously we went into the pandemic. So, but there's a lot of confusion out there. So I'd like for the public to know, as well as us, because I'm personally just as confused as to like when this changed, or was there ever a policy, or why were we allowing it at one point and now we're not? Because that's the perception that's out there. And I guess I'm trying to understand it as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I can't necessarily speak to what was going on in people's minds in 2019, but I think what the idea was that we granted, and this is a whole separate topic of conversation, but that we granted street closure and other closure permits, parking lot closure permits, and we kind of didn't inquire into what was going on in that closed area. So if you closed a portion of Main Street for First Friday, well, you had that portion of the street, and whatever you wanted to do in there was up to you. That's sort of the Artelicious model. Obviously, they have had historically food trucks down in south end of Main Street as part of that event. With respect to private property, there is a mechanism for allowing them on private property right now. It's in the zoning ordinance. It's temporary use permit, but those are granted by the zoning board of appeals, and they require like 60 days notice to get before the zoning board of appeals. And so every time we tell a property owner that wants to have an event that's the process, they just throw up their hands, and that doesn't work for them because they haven't planned that far ahead. This First Friday, we have a closed area, but that is not the place where food trucks want to operate. So food trucks want to operate in the parking lot behind. Well, that's not part of the permitted area. And there's really no authority under the code to allow them in public parking lots, especially absent some closure permit right now.
I guess I'll go real quick. I made it very clear that I would never support this until we are back to 100% capacity. The restaurant industry has suffered, in my opinion, the most devastating effect when it comes to the pandemic. I don't think the timing's right for this. You know, I do like food trucks. I like the idea of it. Comparing it to Traverse City's ordinance, I mean, Traverse City is a tourist city. I mean, they got millions of people to go up there every year. They have a lot of folks who go up there every year for vacation. We have some substantial investment in our downtown proprietors that took a beating last year. So I'm just putting myself in that situation. If I owned a building and a restaurant in downtown, what I wanted out front of my place. And I remember a couple years ago, we had an event downtown. I can't remember which one it was, but one of the local proprietors that has a food truck parked right out in front of Al Wilkerson's place. And he was not happy about that. So I have to take in the fact that these restaurant owners are just trying to get back, hopefully, to 100%. Even at 100%, the margin's small in the restaurant business. So if you take any piece of the pie out of their cash flow or their sales, it's going to be a tough pill to swallow. And again, I'm not against it. I think the timing's wrong right now. And I understand these folks want to get up for these events coming down the pipelines that the city's going to be having. But my job is to look out for the taxpayers of our downtown district. So that's where I'm at with it. I'd like to hear you guys' thoughts on what you guys think about the issue. So,
Well, I would like to really see, Heritage Park. Like there's a lot of baseball tournaments and things like that going on out there. And I think, especially those kind of parks. But I guess one of my questions, Greg, is like even Comstock Park. I just don't even know where they would be able to park near Comstock Park, but it's a little bit farther away from that. I would like to see them at a distance, but maybe it is parks. Like I really like that idea, but especially Heritage. And that's where I think, that we really need to definitely focus that on, because I don't even think we have concessions ever running out there to my knowledge. And, to give that, to be able to offer that, I think you'll get more revenue on tournaments and things coming in when they know that they can have food trucks there too, to provide for those tournaments.
Well, like I say, the adopting the ordinance doesn't determine where they will be. That would be set by resolution, and you can go incrementally. So if you were to put the ordinance in place and you decided phase one, you're just going to allow it in certain parks where there's parking lots in those parks, that's something you could do. And then it would be very flexible in terms of your ability to modify that going forward as conditions were to change.
I don't have a problem with like Heritage Park or Island Park for Little League but I would not support any downtown right now, because again, it's like, these folks are scraping by, they're trying to get back to full capacity, and who knows when that's going to be. The governor said 70% vaccination, but who knows if it'll be 80% by then. I need to look out for those folks. When it comes to our parks, I would support that. So if we want to be strategic in where we put them, that's fine. And I would definitely be willing to open up to the idea of it. But downtown right now, in a year or so, when hopefully we're out of this, or however long, I would be more apt to support even downtown. But right now, I just can't get my head around it. So
I align with Commissioner Helt, and to your question related to alcohol, I would eliminate that right now, especially, even if it's downtown, we got Dara. If it's in the parks, we don't allow alcohol there anyway. So just eliminate that opportunity at all, and we can baby step our way into this.
Was this discussed at DDA? I feel like it has been, and what has been their, what are their thoughts about this? Are they the ones who wanted us to do this again?
I wouldn't say they wanted us to do it. We did discuss it with them as well. I didn't show them the actual ordinance. We just had the general discussion. My recollection of that was that it was generally favorable toward the idea.
Yeah, that was my thought too. When I think I was listening in on that conversation for that meeting, and they seemed to want the food trucks. Now, whether any of them were the restaurant owners in on that meeting, I can't recall that. But I agree with Commissioner Helt. The restaurants are certainly hard hit, but yeah, I don't know.
What about the rest of the businesses that are downtown that are being hit with COVID as well and operating at limited capacity because you can only have so many people in your store and stuff? But if if the restaurants downtown are being hard hit, we can't control that right now. We can't control the amount of people that are in there. That's being controlled by the state. But to get more people downtown to see the other businesses and stuff, if we can supply some food trucks so more people can come and eat downtown and hit more of the businesses, I'm a little concerned that we're limiting the amount of people that are coming downtown because they know sauces or hooligans or, you know, the tea shop, that they're packed already because we can only fit so many people in there. So I'm just a little concerned we might be limiting the people that would come down to shop, et cetera, if we say that, if we base it just on restaurants.
Well, kind of, I guess from the DDA perspective, how many on the DDA own a restaurant downtown? So that's my first point. Again, it's like I'm putting myself in restaurant owners downtown's shoes. And I guess, you know, to your point, Kelly, about are we limiting people, you know, by not having them downtown? It's like, but we do have a lot of food options downtown. And I think that it'd be like, I'm trying to put my, like, putting a truck that's gonna sell the General's Insurance in front of Catnick's building, but it's on a city road. And they're passing out flyers. I mean, you know, trying to recruit businesses to move over to that kind of insurance company. So again, it's like, you know, I just feel like, you know, it's not the time to do it, but again, I'm only one person and I'm putting myself in their shoes, and because you better be doggone right, if they put a food truck in front of my place, I'm gonna have issue with it, you know, at least in the short term until we get out of this pandemic, so.
And Greg, are you saying that if they have a permit, like it's a special event, like Artelicious, things like that? I know you said it isn't totally regulated yet, and that would be under this ordinance, but they then can have those food vendors or no? Like, where is that at? Like, I'm just looking out and a little concerned about Artelicious right now. I know there's another event coming up this weekend that I do believe was planning to have food. So I'm just, I'm concerned, and I'm looking out for those and wondering where this, what the effect is on that and like where they are now.
Well, like I say, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of those who were issuing those permits back in 2019 and imagine how that was rationalized. But I mean, there is no authority in the city code right now to allow food trucks other than like a peddler's permit, which I think we have, which would be distinct because you have to be moving to be a peddler. You know, it would be, you know, and within the context of an ordinance like this, you could provide for them at special events. You know, that's a discussion item. I mean, no, this does not contemplate putting them in front of any business, as Commissioner Helt said. You know, I don't think anyone would propose parking them in front of businesses on the street. The places that have done this tend to do them in a relatively distant place with backlot parking, like I was talking about, not up front. Though, I mean, studies have shown as it relates to food trucks that they don't really compete with sit-down restaurants. They compete with fast food restaurants.
$7.
Can we mute that, Michelle? There we go. You know, it tends, that's just, I mean, I understand it's hard to get beyond that perception that people have, but that's what studies tend to show, is that they do compete with fast food, but they don't compete with sit-down restaurants.
Well, my opinion is that we get the ordinance ironed out with the restrictions in the resolution, because 60 days notice is unrealistic, and talk about being unfriendly government or unfriendly policy. That's one right there. So, I mean, I think that we at least work on the ordinance, and then the placement, it will be very carefully considered, I think.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with Commissioner Watson. In fact, I was going to ask Mr. Elliott if that exact question. Would you advise us to worry about the ordinance now, and by the time that's done, we'll have a better feel for the vaccinations, where the state's going, and we can deal with the placement after we've passed the ordinance?
Yeah, that would be my advice, is that you get the authority in place, both this ordinance and your general ordinances and the amendment to the zoning ordinance that I suggested, so that it's possible for them to operate. And then work incrementally on the map that defines where they can operate.
I like that idea, but I would like to have a discussion and hear from the fellow commissioners on the alcohol. If they should be allowed to sell alcohol. And Greg, thank you for putting that in bold, so it drew my attention right away. Wow, I hadn't thought about that, having vendors selling alcohol, but
Well, we've never allowed alcohol in the parks.
yeah.
And no, to me, that was in the draft ordinance because it was in the ordinance we picked up, but to me, and we obviously drafted this before DARA existed. But now with DARA, on the one hand, downtown, you don't want to compete with DARA necessarily. And on the other hand, as you say, in parks, as Commissioner Strayer says, in parks, we don't allow alcohol typically, other than with a special event permit. And so my advice would be to remove it, but I'll obviously do whatever you want.
When could you get the first reading of the ordinance on the agenda?
I think we can probably get that on next meeting. We'll work toward that. If not, it'll be your first meeting in June.
Thank you.
If we have the first reading and the second reading and we vote for it, though, does that mean someone can come and try and get a license, or can we put a limit or a time frame for when this is going to be allowed?
Oh, you could, yeah, and by the time we get to second reading, we'll have a map and a starter map, if you will, and a fee schedule to go along with it that you would adopt by resolution, and that will set the parameters both in terms of time and location for when they can operate.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else on that?
I just got a quick question. If and when we, have the second reading and we vote in favor of it, and the ordinance is going to become effective, is there a time period within which we have to make it effective, or can we make it a future date? So like 2 months later, or to give us time to figure out where we want them, or is that something we really should know before we approve the ordinance? So I'm saying the time between the first and the second, should we start deciding whether we're going to allow this or not?
Well, that would be my recommendation. I don't know that you couldn't do that, but like I say, you can start out with, the consensus locations, Heritage Park, Island Park, and then it's very flexible from that point forward by resolution at any given meeting to modify the map.
I think it's a good approach. Thank you.
Anything else on that? Right, the next item is our continuing discussion regarding community development department structure. I had a request to put the idea of a blight coordinator on the agenda as well. Commissioner Castleberry had asked me to put that on. I think Mayor asked me to include further discussion about community development department structure. So those are both on there for your discussion tonight.
Commissioner Castleberry, do you want to go ahead with your blight coordinator position idea and discuss that?
So when I first came on the commission last October, I started learning more and more about blight. I saw that the conversation was gaining momentum. And so I started having conversations and doing a lot of research about it. And blight is defined many different ways, right? Graffiti, abandoned property, litter, dilapidated houses, drug dealers, human trafficking. But so track crime, violence, lower property values, hazards, elevated lead levels. So I was thinking and considering all those things, and I'm watching our population in the city decrease. And one of our greatest assets is leaving, which is our children. So I feel like, blight kind of happens when we lose focus and consider things and stop considering people. So I think blight is a huge detriment to our community, and it's of utmost importance that we make some positive change there. So I wanted to been brainstorming a lot of ways in which what we could do, and I've been listening to other conversations. And I would like to discuss a full-time employee that spearheads a blight program in partnership with an innovative and a diverse team of community members that quantify and qualify some goals and metrics for success. I thought the blight person would kind of be the face of blight for us. They'd be educating the public, presentations. They would be forming relationships with outside agencies outside of the city that have, accomplished success here, seeking outside ideas, grants, and successes, forming and maintaining community relationships, helping to build and produce community-minded resolutions and compliance, and if needed, working toward prosecution. It's kind of my idea in a nutshell.
Do you see that in addition to a full-time community development director then? Or what was
I
your
do.
thought?
I saw this as an addition. I see that us making an investment in our community and trying to change the direction of blight. It seems that most of the cities that I studied that have had blight, and in conversation with other people that have studied, it takes about 5 years to even get about 50% of our blight gone. So I think it'll take some time to come up with those goals and quantify them, qualify them, find some measurements for success. So I do see this as a full-time position.
I support the exploration of this. A job description is very important in a role of this nature, and a very specific job description, not a lot of room for wiggle in how we define success. And Kelly, you touched on it, with quantifiable measures to determine success. That's where I'm at on the matter. I do support it in theory, but I would need to see it go a little bit further, or see it developed a little bit further before I'm like, yep, this is one for the books.
Let me jump
And I
in.
guess
here and
another
say that-
question I have is, do you see this person working side by side with community development up, in that area, since the community development area, also is where there's code enforcement, there's blight. Do you see, them, working in tandem and reporting to the city administrator? How do you see that relationship?
Well, I see all employees reporting to the city administrator, but I don't have a job description. What I have is an idea. I have an idea to hopefully make some positive change. I have work that needs to be, and more discussion that needs to be had. Do I see them working side by side with the community development director? I'm not sure what that would look like. As Brad said, we need a stronger job description, things like that. This was an idea I had through a lot of conversation and study that I've had. I'm taking a look at crime rates. I'm taking a look at what draws people to the communities, why people are walking away from our community, things like that. So I just think that we've been talking about blight for a while and we haven't gotten I mean, we're moving in the right direction. I'm not saying we're not making positive change right now. I just think we could be doing more. And I think that there's some potential with a full-time position to really excel at this.
I definitely support the exploration of this, this position. And that's, I think, been a lot of that basis even of the discussions of restructuring the community development director, because we know that job encompasses too much with all of, and all of our focus right now that's on blight, and that how can you be focused on community development when you're focused on blight and you're being pulled in all these directions? And, and we're putting a bigger focus and a bigger emphasis on blight now. So let's put some teeth to that. And, I really do support at least looking at this, getting a job description and, and like what this would entail and what this would look like.
But Mayor, to your point right there of spreading somebody too thin and focusing, I think that we do need to take care of our own kitchen right now with regards to Matt and his role above engineering, DPW, parks. Like there's some division there that should be considered as well. And just kind of move these bits around as maybe as one fell swoop of, hey, this is where we're going to go with this. And this is what our new nimble city looks like.
Could not agree more.
Commissioner Watson's comments about having a good definitive job description with accountability and measurements and, objectives, I think is a good one. My guess is, and I could be completely wrong, Commissioner Castleberry doesn't have a lot of experience in writing job descriptions. Perhaps though, as a suggestion, Commissioner Castleberry could get with Heather Lasky and work, who could help, write the job description. And I mean, I only suggest that because Heather's the HR person and hopefully would have more experience in being able to do that kind of stuff. But I agree. We need a good, strong job description to do this.
As a director and someone that has employees, I do and have written job descriptions. However, this is not my specialty. So I would need help or input from someone that has more ideas in development, planning, zoning, and blight than I do, because that is not my specialty. So it would probably not be me that would write this job description.
So Greg, not to tell your employees what to do, does that approach make sense to you?
Yeah, I think that would be fine. We can give parameters to Heather, and she could come up with something, and maybe even, the other part of that is determining what the compensation level of this position is. And we have a compensation study that was done by the Michigan Municipal League, and it has rating factors. And so, that's what compensation committee does when it meets. The four of us meet and evaluate based on job descriptions where those the jobs should be in that classification scale. And so we could even go through that. Once we have the job description, we can then go through that exercise as well to determine what the compensation level for that position should be.
I guess, and again, I appreciate the phone call yesterday. Kelly and I talked last night about this idea, and I do like it in theory. But before I can wrap my head around it, and I expressed my concern with her about this also, is that I have to see numbers. When you're adding positions, you're not only adding an employee, you're adding also legacy costs on top of that. So, job descriptions are important, but I want to see what's going to cost us long term, even though in my personal opinion, I feel that blight is the single most important thing that's plaguing our city right now. But again, it's a numbers game. We're adding, from what I understand, is that we're adding the community development director position back, but we're also adding another full-time employee back, or to hire another full-time employee. So what does that look like when it comes to a budgetary issue? When it comes to insurance and salary, retirement. So again, because those don't go away. So again, I love the idea in theory, but again, I need to see numbers first. And I did express that to Kelly last night when we talked that when you're adding employees, you got to kind of stop and pause and really crunch some numbers and see, because those legacy costs don't go away. So that's my only concern with it. But I definitely support the idea, exploring it, and see where we go. So I appreciate Kelly working hard and trying to get some kind of plan together so we can attack it. Because again, I'll say it again, it's the single most thing that's plaguing our city right now, in my opinion. So.
And so if it is the single most important thing in our city, I think it is important that you really consider the cost of this and where that would go. So if it is the single most important thing plaguing our city, then we're not going to find success in other ways unless we deal with this as well.
That's fair.
Let me jump in.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Strayer.
Let me jump in and just say that, yes, I think we should explore this further. It's very important, but I also want to make sure that we continue to look for this community development director that we have been looking for already. I don't want that to go to the back burner just because we're talking about this other position. So yeah, I think that we should talk with Heather and start looking at what that description would look like. And in answering Commissioner Helt, I agree that you always have to look at the numbers, but I would say this, because it is such an important position, and the fact that, heck, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, we had a lot more employees, a lot more full-time employees than we have now. And so I think our financial picture is better. It's, I think that we're moving in the right direction. We're looking at an important job. So I don't think that we should be scared off by the numbers. So we just have to keep moving forward.
And to that point, Commissioner Strayer, that's what I was going to say. The one thing Commissioner Strayer and Commissioner Helt and I, along with others, were on this group that was really looking at blight and talking to other communities that have, dealt with blight and really done a great job and been very successful in turning that around. That was something that was brought up quite a bit by everyone that presented to us from these other communities, is that it's going to hurt maybe a little bit on your pocketbook, because you're going to have to put possibly personnel, possibly money into demo, whatever it might be, but there is going to be a cost, but you can't get that gain without the cost. So we did hear that over and over again. So something to take into consideration as well.
Well, let me clear up the comment on there's no price tag put on this position, because let's be honest here, all of the city commission understand there was a plan in place that kind of blew up, right? That wouldn't have cost us much money at all. And so I'll leave that there.
So a couple things based on your discussion. I've had in my mind the idea of setting up a fund out of some of the funds we've realized from property sales this year. Obviously, we're spending some of them on recreation assets, but we just closed on $1.8 million of properties. So there's quite a bit of money in our bank account right now that we did not anticipate at the beginning of this fiscal year. And what I have in my mind is that we could set up a very substantial revolving loan fund that would be available, similar to the way we used to use CBDG funds back when we had a housing department, to make low interest loans, to allow for the repair of and painting of homes that are owner occupied, that are not rental properties, where there's a demonstrated need on behalf of the property owner. And we already have these cases arising. So as spring comes, that's scrape and paint season in the code enforcement world. There's lots of those notices out there with due dates around the end of May and middle of June. And those folks are already calling code officers and saying, well, I can't afford it. I'm 85 years old and I'm on a fixed income. I can't afford to paint my house. I realize it needs to be painted. With a fund like that would be administered by somebody like this, you could make those. You wouldn't give it to the property owner, we would make arrangements, you'd take bids, you'd make arrangements with the contractors to do the work. You take a note and a mortgage on that property, and we still have those mortgages that get paid off from time to time back from the housing department days. Yeah, and so then you create a fund that revolves, that isn't like the year we got a blight grant and it was all gone in demolitions in a matter of months and never to be seen again. This would be a fund that revolves, that can be deployed judiciously in those circumstances where there's demonstrated need, and get some of that work done, whether it's painting, whether it's re-roofs, whether it's other kinds of repairs that are blighting factors. It could even be property cleanup. But as long, the key is to make sure it comes back to the fund at the end of the day. So that's one thing that I think we should be thinking about. That'd be my recommendation. You'd be thinking about in terms of rolling out a blight program that's compassionate and that's well funded. This position itself, again, could be sort of an endowed position, where you pre-fund it for with that same, with a dedicated fund for a number of years. If 5 years is the expected period where you're going to achieve certain metrics, 50% reduction is what we learned about in the blight committee that many of us attended. Then you endow it for 5 years so that you know ahead of time that it's paid for at least that long, and you know exactly where those funds are going to come from. As we get to the budget tonight, and as you know from our prior workshop discussions, we're selective in how many positions we're adding. We're adding a lot of things into the budget funded by non-recurring sources, and we've aligned those things with capital needs, not recurring items. And so we do have to think, as Commissioner Held correctly points out, about the sustainability of the position and put funds, if we're going to make a commitment to this, put funds aside now so that we already know they're there. Like I say, it's like an endowed position, so that you already have pre-funded it in a way, at least for a period of time.
Greg, I think to Commissioner Held's point again, let's see the numbers on that and what a proposal is to set aside an investment and to endow that, because I think that is a fantastic idea of making sure funds are secured for that purpose.
The last thing we want to do is run out of money before the mission has been accomplished. So I agree. I think it's a great idea. I'd like to know more about it, but this is going to be an ongoing, we know it's going to be 4 or 5, 6 years that we're going to be continuing to address the issue, and we can't run out of funding too early.
Commissioner Castleberry, one thing too, I would really like to see with, job description or just see if this were to happen, is we need some concerted effort of volunteer groups, because Greg and I get a lot of times churches or other community groups reaching out to us saying, what can we do to help? What can we do to help? And, painting a house would be a great thing to tell them, get the paint, get with the homeowner, go paint this house, help this person, that's in this, that needs help with their blight, that maybe they're on a fixed income and they can't do it. We just don't have that person, that avenue to connect all those dots right now. I mean, that's where there's there's just, it's a little dysfunctional right there. So it's just another thought to put into that as well.
Right, the key word of blight being dysfunction, right? Like I said, and then when I listed some I didn't obviously create a job description completely, but I listed some things that I thought that a blight person should do. And one of them is educating the public and, seeking outside ideas and grants to help cover costs, as well as forming and maintaining community relationships that would help, speaking as a veteran, I know that there are veteran groups that help build wheelchair ramps and help do things with homes. And help is offered.
Froze. You froze for a minute there at the end, Commissioner Castleberry.
Sorry, I said as the veteran speaking that I know that we already do some of those things, and it would be to have a full-time person that is keeping track of the groups that some of that. So when we have a home that it needs to be painted, we have a group that will paint it. That would be part of their job, is to maintain those groups.
I remember we talked about when Mayor Jacobson was in office about seeing if we can legally get to a point where we can allocate some funds from the oil trust when it comes to that. When it comes like painting and fixing a porch, there'd be certain income requirements, there'd be certain parameters around that, but we didn't know if we could legally give money away. So that's something that we need to, I mean, as a collective group, build consensus. Is that something we want the city attorney to look into and see if we can go that route, if we're allowed to do that or not? But I thought it was a great idea. It's a way to use some of that money. Again, the oil trust was designed to improve quality of life. And what better way to improve quality of life by combating blight and having a true blight remediation program. So again, it's all about building consensus as a group, and then directing one of the, whether it be Tamara's or having Greg look into it and see if we're actually allowed to do that. But that was, I think that's a great idea. You kind of killed two birds with one stone, and I would support looking at that. So.
Okay, any other discussion on that item? Not, we'll work on a job description and some financials for you for a future discussion. We do have, it's not on your pre-meeting agenda, but we do have Chief Emmerich here tonight. Thought maybe there would be some interest in hearing from him about some of the challenges that he's had in recent days here, and his thoughts on that. Chief, are you available for us right now?
I am.
Can you just kind of comment on what's been going on of late and your observations about that?
Yes, sir. Yeah, what we've experienced, we've had a spate of violent events over the last 10 days. Putting together some quick notes. I've got about 7 events here. You might have seen in the newspaper or heard on the radio. That is not uncommon for our first few warm days of the year. That's usually what happens, is something will kick off and we'll have some serious events, and then things die down as we start to make arrests. This year, it's unique in that a lot of it is coming from vehicles shooting at each other, vehicles shooting at houses. That's not really something that we have experienced in this volume before. Excuse me. It adds a challenge in that, the scene stretches several blocks. We had an event here over the weekend that went about 4 blocks down Beecher. Finding the casings and witnesses over that span before the evidence is driven over can be challenging. We also had a stabbing where we did make an arrest on unrelated charges. We will be charging that individual. However, I cannot release that until that person has been arraigned. We've had a few events that we cannot necessarily qualify in that we don't have any evidence to be found. So for example, someone hears a large noise, they call in a shots fired. We arrive, we look for witnesses, we look for casings, and we find none. So I'm hesitant to say that those are unfounded. However, we can't really establish that they did take place. There are a lot of challenges involved with investigating those types of events, but mainly what we need is neighborhood involvement. We need people to let us know what they see and hear. People are reluctant these days, mainly, in part because with the changes in legislation, with the changes in progressive reform, there are fewer people going to jail. So if you can imagine being a witness to an event and you're afraid of reprisals, you may know that either that person isn't going to go to jail the same day, or maybe they don't stay in there. You might be afraid that something might happen to you as a result of being involved. So there's a little bit of fear involved with that, but mainly what we need is the community to assist so that we can get as much information as possible. And to most extent, we have that. We do have names associated with all of these events. We have vehicle descriptions. People are letting us know what's happening. And now it is on us to complete the investigation and get them charged. Can I answer any questions about any of those events?
Chief Hemrick, I appreciate the difficult position you're in these days. It does seem like there's quite a bit going on. When you speak with other police chiefs in the area, around the country, around Michigan, are they seeing similar types of activities, or is this rather unique to Adrian?
Yes, Commissioner, it seems to be a nationwide, if not global trend. In our annual report last year, we noted a decrease in overall calls for service, but a sharp increase in violent activity. So we're tracking the events as they happen, but we are certainly not alone for this type of stuff happening.
Chief Emmerich, I think you and I have talked about several of these issues in the past, and I don't like it. I get contacted all the time now, particularly with the increasing level of violence and the frequency anyway. So I get a lot of comments from people, and everybody wants to tell you what you're doing wrong, but nobody ever comes forward with the solution, or rarely do people come through with a solution. The one I hear frequently, though, is that we need to do more, what I don't even know how to define it, community policing, that we need to have our officers out in the neighborhoods, developing the relationships with the citizens so that when there is a problem, they may be more forthcoming with information because of this relationship that has been developed with law enforcement. I'm just throwing that out there because that's the things people tell me. There's that. And then I heard another suggestion this morning, again, one we've talked about, is actually putting a police substation in the affected neighborhoods too, so that there's kind of a permanent, small, loosely staffed, and maybe it's a combination of the two. If you did something with a substation and use those officers to, walk the community, kind of like walking the beat in the old days in New York City or Chicago, where the cops knew everybody who lived in the neighborhood. The people in the neighborhood knew all the cops, and they were talking all the time. So I'll just throw that out there because, again, we hear a lot of complaints and people that don't offer solutions. And when you get a few people that are saying the same kind of thing, I think it might be helpful.
Chief,
I'm sorry.
what can we do to support you? Like, what can we do to help? Like, I mean, this is something I actually brought up to our city administrator today. Like, is there something that we can do more to support you to help you in this? Like, because I know other than I knew community watch groups or getting those neighborhoods involved, and but like, what are you needing?
Okay, thank you, Mayor. First, if I could address Commissioner Gauss's comments. In particular, on that day that we received, it was a shots fired call in the area of Division and Church Street. I was actually on bike patrol on that day. I was trying to stick to the downtown area and do exactly as you described. And I do have a lot of positive contacts during that. However, during that time, we had a home invasion and we were making an arrest a few blocks over on Church Street. So as I pedaled over there to assist, we're making the arrest and we get this other call. So the challenge is, you can dedicate someone to that, but our call volume is such that invariably we're going to be called away to deal with something, and something's going to kick off on the other side of town. So I think establishing those relationships is very important. But it's going to be, if I understand you correctly, you're thinking that the information is going to flow after the fact. You might get some more phone calls and more tips because the public has a person specifically to contact, which I can certainly understand that.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I guess I was saying that if we develop the relationships, the issue that you have to deal with where people aren't forthcoming because they're afraid of retaliation, that they will have more confidence in our law enforcement agency to try to keep that from happening. I understand people aren't going to go to jail. If the criminals aren't going to jail, I can understand being afraid. But I may be imagining things, but I would hope that developing these strong relationships with the community would, keep the fear from being as strong as maybe it is. So.
I definitely agree. That is one of the foundations of police work, is a strong relationship with the community, and you can never go wrong in cultivating that. So I certainly agree there. To give an example, someone did contact me last week and asked the status of a certain case. And when I pull it up on the register of actions, it's been adjourned 5 times with no court date in the future. So there's a lot of things that play into that. But I can only offer so much comfort to a person, when that's how things are going on the back end of the arrest. Mayor, to your question, I wish I could say it were something as simple as, give me a few more officers or this or that, but in truth, we have not been fully staffed since the last time the commission increased our number of officers. Right now we're carrying 2 vacancies, and we just have that much difficulty finding people to fill them. So we have transitioned into a total sponsorship type program. We don't have any certified applicants anymore. So we are looking for qualified local people that will stay, and we are sponsoring them through the academy. So hoping for the best there. The issue becomes then it takes a full year to train that person. They're going to spend 4 months in the academy, and then they're going to spend 6 months in field training, and it's a full year before I can use them. And how many retirements, departures do I have in that year while I'm waiting for that person to come out? So one of the things I've been talking about with Nathan and Steve in finance is a way to plan for that. Obviously, I can't pre-hire people and train them because, maybe someone's retirement date changes or something happens, and then I have these 2 people and I'm forced to do a layoff or something of that nature. But succession planning is going to be big in the next year or 2 for us here. In terms of what else I could certainly make use of is a new camera system. We've broached that a little bit in the budget, and I would like to speed that up and ask for it in the next cycle to replace our body-worn cameras. That's of vital importance both for the public and for us.
Thank you. I know there might be other questions for you, but we are running out of time and we need to have time for the public comment. But we really appreciate you coming and speaking to us, Chief Emmerich, and thank you for all you do. We know this is a very trying time for you, and none of us would like to be in your position right now. And we thank you for serving our city and being in that position. So
thank you, Mayor. My pleasure. I will be at public comment for the regular meeting as well.
Thanks. At this time, we are going to go to public comment. If you have public comment, please state your name and address.
Ken Tokars, 110 South Locust. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I guess I want to talk about food trucks today. I think you guys, if this was 2019, you're still kicking the can down the road. I think that, I agree with Mr. Elliott that food trucks do not compete with brick and mortar businesses. I think you should approve the ordinance at the next meeting. I think that, if you want to deal with Al Wilkerson, basically have Matt come out and in your ordinance say you can't have a food truck within, let's just say 300 feet of a current food business. So Matt comes out and Matt shows Al Wilkerson where 300 feet is from his business. They take a color, they put a paint like a 6-inch circle that's not a utility color, maybe like aqua, and that's Al's mark, and basically a food truck can't park there. Boom, you're done and you can move on. I agree with Commissioner Strayer. Yeah, you can't have alcohol in the parks. The other thing you guys did with the chickens is you said that you could add or adjust, or there was one of those ordinances where you could add or adjust. I think you just need to get it out there. On a personal note, with the businesses downtown, I mean, I'll go to sauce, but I'm not going in there. So I think it's irrelevant to hold off. I mean, I'll get carry out if I want to get sauce. I like their food. Rice and barley I'll go to. I'm not going to Hooligans. I've been there a couple times. I'm not going to a bar to eat. So it's kind of limited. So I think you're really hurting the other downtown area businesses by not just allowing food trucks. And then if you put on there something about personal property, someone's going to find a loophole to put one on personal property. I think quit kicking the can down the road and get the food truck ordinance going and just let them put them wherever they want. The only thing you can't do is, let's just say, you can't have them within 300 feet of a business, and you can't have alcohol in a park. Keep it simple and move forward. The other thing is disappointed that Commissioner Watson's not running. If he did run, I would vote for him in the as write-in. Might not agree on something, but I think he does a good job. The other thing is, I challenge Will Garcia to start getting up in public comment and hearing some of his crazy ideas, because he's been silent, and now it's your time to talk. Thanks, people.
Nancy Eaton Gordon, I'd like to make public comment if I'm able.
Go ahead.
My address is 712 Oxford Court here in Adrian. I also have a business at 160 North Winter Street here in Adrian. Just had a couple comments. I'll try to keep them short. Regarding the blight coordinator, I'm not sure that it makes sense for the city at this time to have two positions for something that may potentially be consolidated into one. The city's been on a search for a community development coordinator for about 6 months now. Still, we're no closer to having anybody to fill that position. While I agree blight is critical, so is efficiency. And if we're going to have someone overseeing blight, I'm not sure why it couldn't be rolled into that description of what we're still looking for. Blight in the community, I think, as many commissioners have pointed out in a roundabout way, do go hand in hand. We need to strengthen our community by getting rid of blight. So respectfully, I would say that. Commissioner Halt, I think, points it out correctly that the cost is a major factor that needs to be considered, but so is the job description. I also want to espouse upon a point that I think has been oversought or understated here. Isn't the city attorney working on spearheading blight and blight issues? Unless my memory fails, I know last year there was a big to-do with Habitat for Humanity. There's been outreach to other communities. There's been outreach to contractors who are working to try to wrangle in the blight issue, to try to bring this to the forefront and not only get it addressed, but get it fixed. It's not just about taxing the citizens or taxing and applying cost. I think that unfortunately has been understated, and some people are either not willing to say it or frankly taking credit where credit is not due to them. I think it needs to be brought out that this has been addressed and is being addressed. Back to the community development director, I think we do need to fill that position first. The city's been having a position by my count for about 8 months trying to fill this. And each time there's not enough qualified people. There's not enough people. So now we want to create 2 job positions rather than filling the one that we know we are in desperate need of and trying to expand on that person. We now want to try to find 2 people to try to fill that job and address a desperate concern. So we should work on filling that position first, getting the city back in order where it needs to be. The last comment towards Commissioner Castleberry, I would just say with all due respect, you need to check the charter. All of you do. If you think there's no sense of checks and balances and that everybody reports to the city administrator, there is a sense of checks and balances built into the system. And I don't think all city employees report to the city administrator. To do so would abort that checks and balances. specifically when it comes to defense of the city in a legal nature. You need to have those checks and balances. Thank you.
Hearing no more public comment, may I get a motion to adjourn our pre-meeting?
Move to adjourn, Watson.
Support Roberts.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Meeting is adjourned and we will begin our regular meeting. I'm sorry for all of those that you were on here that thought we were going to begin at 7. Our pre-meeting ran a little over. We will begin at 7:10. Thank you. For those of you that are just joining, we're going to begin in about 1 minute. Our pre-meeting ran a little over, and so we will begin shortly. Greg, it is now 7:10. Will you begin with our Zoom introduction, please?
Ma'am, good evening, everyone. I'm City Administrator Greg Elliott. It's 7 o'clock or 7:10, and I'd like to address a few things before Mayor Heath officially calls us to order. For much of the meeting, we ask that participants other than commissioners and staff mute themselves to allow the commission to have their discussions and conduct their business. This will also help minimize any background noise that may be disruptive. Opportunities for public comment will be offered at different points throughout the meeting. At those points, participants can unmute themselves and will have an opportunity to address the commission. The 3-minute rule will be in effect. When it's time for public comment, please identify your name and address for the record prior to making your statement. Once we formally begin the meeting, the format and structure is the exact same as an in-person meeting, and we will work through our agenda items as usual. All commission rules and procedures remain in effect. I've talked in the past about Zoom bombing, where a virtual meeting is interrupted by people who fill the screen with objectionable content. If this occurs during our meeting tonight, we will disconnect the meeting and restart after a few minutes. Attendees can reconnect via the same link. We'll also turn over the video of the meeting to law enforcement for investigation. Our agenda is available on our website, as is the packet. That's www.adriancity.com. Thank you all for participating, and Mayor Heath, I'll turn it over to you.
I now call to order the Adrian City Commission meeting for May 3rd, 2021. If everyone would please rise for a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Robin, roll call, please.
Mayor Heath,
Present.
Mr. Halt,
Present.
Mr. Roberts,
Present.
Mr. Watson,
Present.
Mr. Strayer,
Present.
Mr. Gauss,
Present.
Mr. Castleberry,
Present.
all commission members present.
May I get a motion to approve the minutes of the April 19th, 2021 special meeting?
Mayor Heath. That should actually read meeting. The word special was put in there by accident.
I didn't think it was a special meeting. I was confused. Thank you. So may I get a motion to approve the minutes of the April 19th, 2021 meeting?
Move to approve, Watson.
Support Gauss.
I have a motion from Commissioner Watson with a second from Commissioner Gauss. Roll call, please.
Mr. Halt,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Watson,
Yes.
Mr. Strayer,
Yes.
Mr. Gauss,
Yes.
Mr. Castleberry,
Yes.
Mayor Heath.
Yes.
Minutes approved by unanimous vote.
May I get a motion to pay the vouchers as presented?
Move to
Move to
pay
pay.
the vou- oh, go ahead.
Move to pay the vouchers as presented, Roberts.
Support, help.
I have a motion from Commissioner Roberts with a second from Commissioner Halt. Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Watson,
Yes.
Mr. Strayer,
Yes.
Mr. Gauss,
Yes.
Mr. Castleberry,
Yes.
Mayor Heath,
Yes.
Mr. Halt.
Yes.
Vouchers approved by unanimous vote.
Tonight we have two proclamations, and the first proclamation is going to be for Rio Doyle. I do know she is on this call. I did see her name on the participant list. So I will go ahead and read this proclamation to Rio, and then Rio, I will be getting together with you and getting you the physical actual proclamation eventually. Whereas Rio Doyle's performance on The Voice, a televised reality singing competition, have made her a household name across the nation. And whereas at age 16, Rio had the courage and ambition to pursue her dreams. And whereas Rio was selected in the blind auditions by singer-songwriter John Legend, and whereas in the first round of knockouts, Rio competed against another singer on John Legend's team, winning that knockout battle. And whereas, although the competition ended for Rio after the second round of knockouts, the judges had nothing but praise for her performance. And whereas Rio Doyle is an example to all the youth in our community and across the country of the great heights they can reach through pursuit of their dreams. And whereas Rio's courage and dedication is admirable, and her achievement is an outstanding representation of our community, now therefore, I, Angela Sword Heath, Mayor of the City of Adrian, Michigan, do hereby acknowledge and honor Rio, and thank you for making Adrian and your community proud. Thank you, Rio.
Thank you so much. That made me cry. I didn't know if I could talk or not because I was watching this and I'm like, it seems all official.
It is, but on a proclamation you can. So we wanted to acknowledge you and just tell you how proud you have made Adrian and the entire community, and we're very proud of you, and keep going.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad to be representing Adrian.
Thanks, Rio.
Bye.
Our second proclamation is for the Adrian Noon Rotary Club, and I know many of their members are on tonight, including Chuck Chase, who had reached out to me many months ago informing me that it was the anniversary of the Adrian Noon Rotary Club. So I would like to do a proclamation for them right now. Whereas the Adrian Noon Rotary Club in Adrian, Michigan was organized on March 24th, 1921 at a banquet held at the Gussenbauer Tea Room in downtown Adrian. And whereas some 24 men who were visiting Rotarians from the Toledo, Jackson, and Hillsdale clubs were the charter members. And whereas soon after its founding, the club implemented a free medical clinic in Adrian to care for children with disabilities. And whereas in 1961, Adrian Rotarians organized the Adrian Rotary Foundation. And whereas in 1965, the club led an effort to save the historic Croswell Opera House from demolition by raising the needed money for renovation. And whereas in 1989, the club entered the international arena with the support of a dental clinic in Brazil. And whereas in 1993, just 2 years after the launch of Rotary International's Polio Plus campaign, the club raised more than $100,000 for this program. And whereas the Adrian Rotary Club has had the distinct honor of having 5 members serve as district governor, Eugene Olson Sr., John Dawson, Bill Chase, and Bruce and Sue Goldson. And whereas to commemorate its 100th anniversary, a centennial clock will be dedicated and placed in Adrian's Comstock Park in June of 2021. Now, therefore, I, Angela Sword Heath, Mayor of the City of Adrian, Michigan, do hereby honor and recognize the Adrian Noon Rotary Club as a centennial club for its many contributions to this community, and in keeping true to Rotary International's theme of service above self. Thank you, Adrian Noon Rotary. Chuck, would you like to say anything?
I'd love to, Mayor. Thank you so much for this unique recognition. It's a milestone in our club's history. I'm looking around the room here and seeing a lot of former, current, and past Rotarians. And I know I don't want to forget anybody here. Gordon Gauss is a member of the Adrian AM Morning Club. We got Barry Reineck, who is a board member and current member of our Noon Rotary Club. I saw the former Mayor Berriman here. He must have known I was going to speak, so he left, and I'm going to look out and see if he's on his porch. But and then Don Taylor is a former Adrian Noon Rotarian, right, Don? In fact, when you look very closely at those charter documents that were signed 100 years ago, I took them to the Historical Museum and I wanted to verify, and we have proven that one of the signatures is Don Taylor's on that charter.
Amen, Chuck.
Well, congratulations. We look forward to seeing the centennial clock, and, we're sorry that pandemic kind of took away some of the celebration of this year, but we hope we can make it as special as possible and that your 100th anniversary is something to be remembered.
Thank you so much, Mayor and commissioners and staff. I really appreciate it. It's quite an honor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to special orders. Special order 1 is a public hearing to hear and consider comments on the proposed fiscal year 2021-22 budget and General Appropriations Act. At this time, I now call the public hearing to order.
Hello, Joaquin Ramos. Can you hear me?
Yes, Ken.
All right. Of course, I'm here to talk about some of the things for our public good and people that I normally would. So first, I'll start with, I like Elliot's small loan program. Most Americans pre-COVID couldn't handle a surprise one-time expense of even $400. And now during COVID, that's significantly worse. So some sort of small loan program that would have zero or very low interest loans would help people dramatically. Of course, you mentioned some as far as painting houses, but also some other similar things as well as it would allow them to get a hold of some people to help them, since some of these people are disabled. So we went through. Now the community director and the Blake coordinator, I think that you should consider putting funds in for more than just one employee, especially considering that even though their duties do overlap and they should be working together, like I would argue all of your workers should be working together, there is some difference in what their top priorities are. One of them is going to need a little bit more caring of a touch than the other, and one of them is going to sit through a lot more community meetings than the other if they want to have an accurate idea of what's going on. So I think they should be two separate things. And finally, I would like to address some of the homeless things. Now, the only way you can really help these people without making things worse is to start looking at some housing, because we already know that we don't have enough room in the homeless shelters. So you need to actually have housing for these people. I recommend housing first strategies that can give them a counselor to help them through some of their issues when they're ready, and someone to help transition them to employment. As well as you should look at what can you do as far as a community grocery store over on parts of Adrian that are food deserts. I could go on about a few other things, but I think that'll suffice for now, especially since some of these are probably longer term. Thank you for your time. That's all.
There's a number 215-4929 that has their hand up.
That
Would
would
you
be
like to
me,
speak
Ken
in the public
Tokars.
hearing? Okay, go ahead.
Ken Tokars, 110 South Locust. I would like to talk about defunding and superfunding. First, with defunding, I would like the city to defund and sell Heritage Park. It's not in the city of Adrian, and I think that it's something that we could easily get rid of. Heritage Park is more of a county park or an ISD park. Now, the LISD, which owns Stubnitz, they have deep pockets. So even if you gave it away for $1, you could potentially eliminate probably 5 employees from that and transfer them to maybe working on the roads. You might be able to take away some of Matt's work. So maybe he could concentrate on maybe like fixing the sign at the front of the school. So I would like to see you consider defunding Heritage Park and selling it to the county or selling it to the ISD for even $1. The other thing with superfunding, I would like to see you superfund the pension deficit. Now, the pension deficit is right now it's around $24 million. And you guys are on some plan. And to me, you call it a plan, but you guys aren't going to be around down the road for that plan. And I think that all we're doing is we're taking out high interest credit cards on our children. I'm surprised someone hasn't FOIA'd the school district to get all the social security numbers of all the kids in preschool so they could go out and get credit cards in their names to pay for our willy-nilly things that we really don't need. We built a dog park. And the ironic number that we talked about during the pre-meeting was 33%. And we raked him over the coals over 33%. But there was no discussion about 33% going over for the dog park. So once again, I'm asking you to superfund the pension deficit and defund Heritage Park and put those employees fixing roads or maybe working on blight. Thank you.
Hearing no more public comments, I now call the public hearing for the proposed fiscal year 2021-22 Budget and General Appropriations Act closed. Moving on to Special Order 2. It is a public hearing to hear and consider comments on the special assessment rule for delinquent invoices, including a 10% penalty for late payment. At this time, I now call the the public hearing to order. Hearing
At this point, we did receive a written objection to one of those invoices, which on your list is 168448, William Frederick. And we found that one plus the other one number 179397 to Lexi Rios were actually added to that list in error, because those are not parties that own real property in the city, and so they cannot be assessed to any real property. So we will be removing those from the list.
Hearing no public comment, I now call the public hearing closed for the special assessment rule for delinquent invoices, including a 10% penalty for late payment. Moving on to Special Order 3. It is a public hearing to hear and consider comments on the special assessment rule for delinquent water and sewer charges, including a 10% penalty for late payment. I now call this public hearing to order. Hearing no public comment, I now call the public hearing on special assessments rule for delinquent water and sewer charges closed. Moving on to resolutions. R21-064 is from Finance. It is a resolution to approve the proposed fiscal year 2021-22 Budget and General Appropriations Act. May I get a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move to adopt the resolution, Roberts.
Support, Watson.
Are there any public comments? Are there any commissioner comments? I have a motion from Commissioner Roberts with a second from Commissioner Watson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Watson,
Yes.
Commissioner Strayer,
Yes.
Commissioner Gauss,
Yes.
Commissioner Castleberry,
Yes.
Mayor Heath,
Yes.
Commissioner Halt,
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts.
Yes.
Resolution adopted by unanimous vote.
Resolution R 21-065 is from Finance. It is a resolution confirming the special assessment role for delinquent invoices, including a 10% penalty for late payment, with the necessary changes that our city administrator just gave us on this. May I get a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move to adopt the resolution, Watson.
Support, help.
Are there any public comments? Are there any commissioner comments? I have a motion from Commissioner Watson with a second from Commissioner Halt. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Strayer,
Yes.
Commissioner Gauss,
Yes.
Commissioner Castleberry,
Yes.
Mayor Heath,
Yes.
Commissioner Halt,
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts,
Yes.
Commissioner Watson.
Yes.
Resolution adopted with the necessary changes mentioned by City Administrator Elliott is approved by unanimous vote.
Resolution R 21-066 is from Finance. It is a resolution confirming the special assessment role for delinquent water and sewer charges, including a 10% penalty for late payment. May I get a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move to adopt the resolution, Watson.
Support, Roberts.
Are there any public comments? Are there any commissioner comments? I have a motion from Commissioner Watson with a second from Commissioner Roberts. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Gauss,
Yes.
Commissioner Castleberry,
Yes.
Mayor Heath,
Yes.
Commissioner Halt,
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts,
Yes.
Commissioner Watson,
Yes.
Commissioner Strayer.
Yes.
Resolution adopted by unanimous vote.
Resolution R 21-067 is from Finance. It is a resolution to approve fiscal year 2020-21 third quarter budget amendments. May I get a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move to adopt the resolution, Roberts.
Support, Gauss.
Are there any public comments? Are there any commissioner comments? I have a motion from Commissioner Roberts with a second from Commissioner Gauss. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Castleberry,
Yes.
Mayor Heath,
Yes.
Commissioner Halt,
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts,
Yes.
Commissioner Watson,
Yes.
Commissioner Strayer,
Yes.
Commissioner Gauss.
Yes.
Resolution adopted by unanimous vote.
Resolution R 21-068 is from the city attorney. It is a resolution to set a public hearing to declare 1003 Broad Street a public nuisance. May I get a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move to adopt the resolution, Gauss.
Support.
Was that Ladd?
Yes.
Correct. Are there any public comments?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
This is Ashley Cavazos Frank, 141 and a half South Main Street. Could you just repeat the address again?
1003 Broad Street.
Thank you. That's all.
Ken Tokars, 110 South Locust. I was hoping that someone could provide more information on what the problem is at this property.
Moving on to commissioner comments. I do have a commissioner comment. I would like our city attorney or city administrator to please address this and what this means. Since the resolution came from our city attorney, will you address that, please?
Certainly. At the request of the city administrator, we've looked into some different properties within the city that have a high number of emergency responder calls related to drug overdoses or where there may be oftentimes drug use, loitering, the things that qualify those properties as a public nuisance under our code. This is one of the particular properties where we've had multiple calls by our emergency responders in the past several months with regard to overdoses or individuals reportedly using drugs at the location.
Thank you. Are there any other commissioner comments? I have a motion from Commissioner Gauss with a second from Commissioner Strayer. Roll call, please.
Mayor Heath,
Yes.
Commissioner Halt,
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts,
Yes.
Commissioner Watson,
Yes.
Commissioner Strayer,
Yes.
Commissioner Gauss,
Yes.
Commissioner Castleberry.
Yes.
Resolution adopted by unanimous vote.
Resolution R21-069 is from administration. It is a resolution to approve the LDFA budget. May I get a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move to adopt the resolution, Watson.
Support, Roberts.
Are there any public comments? Are there any commissioner comments? We have a motion from Commissioner Watson with a second from Commissioner Roberts. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Halt,
We couldn't hear you. Can you repeat that?
Commissioner Halt,
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts,
Yes.
Commissioner Watson,
Yes.
Commissioner Strayer,
Yes.
Commissioner Gauss,
Yes.
Commissioner Castleberry,
Yes.
Mayor Heath.
Yes.
Resolution adopted by unanimous vote.
Resolution R21-070 is from the city clerk. It is a resolution to approve the renewal of the commercial marijuana facilities permit application number RM21-008 for a dual purpose permit for Amazing Buds. May I get a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move we adopt the resolution. Help.
Support, Strayer.
Are there any public comments? Are there any commissioner comments? I have a motion from Commissioner Halt with a second from Commissioner Strayer. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Roberts,
Yes.
Commissioner Watson,
Yes.
Commissioner Strayer,
Yes.
Commissioner Gauss,
Yes.
Commissioner Castleberry,
Yes.
Mayor Heath,
Yes.
Commissioner Halt.
Yes.
Resolution adopted by unanimous vote.
Resolution R21-071 is from the city clerk. It is a resolution to approve a commercial marijuana facilities permit application number RM21-025 for a dual purpose permit for Herb of Life Incorporated. May I get a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move to adopt the resolution, Strayer.
Support Gauss.
Are there any public comments? Are there any commissioner comments? I have a motion from Commissioner Strayer with a second from Commissioner Gauss. Roll call, please.
Mr. Watson,
Yes.
Mr. Strayer,
Yes.
Mr. Gauss,
Yes.
Mr. Castleberry,
Yes.
Mayor Heath,
Yes.
Mr. Hout,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts.
Yes.
Resolution adopted by unanimous vote.
Resolution R 21-072 is from the city clerk. It is a resolution to approve a commercial marijuana facilities permit application number RM 21-026 for a dual purpose permit for Herb of Life Incorporated. May I get a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move to adopt the resolution, Strayer.
Support, help.
Are there any public comments? Are there any commissioner comments? I have a motion from Commissioner Strayer with a second from Commissioner Halt. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Strayer,
Yes.
Mr. Gauss,
Yes.
Mr. Castleberry,
Yes.
Mayor Heath,
Yes.
Mr. Hout,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Watson.
Yes.
Resolution adopted by unanimous vote.
Resolution R 21-073 is from the city clerk. It is a resolution to approve a commercial marijuana facilities permit application number RM 21-024 for a dual purpose permit for Main Street Products LLC. May I get a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move to adopt the resolution. Roberts.
Support Gauss.
Are there any public comments? Are there any commissioner comments? I have a motion from Commissioner Roberts with a second from Commissioner Gauss. Roll call, please.
Mr. Gauss,
Yes.
Mr. Castleberry,
Yes.
Mayor Heath,
Yes.
Mr. Hout,
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Watson,
Yes.
Mr. Strayer.
Yes.
Resolution adopted by unanimous vote.
Resolution R 21-074 is from the city clerk. It is a resolution to approve the renewal of the commercial marijuana facilities permit application number RM 21-012 for an adult use permit for North Coast Collective DBA Flower Pot. May I get a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move to
Move to
adopt, Strayer.
Support. Roberts.
Are there any public comments? Are there any commissioner comments? I have a motion from Commissioner Strayer with a second from Commissioner Roberts. Roll call, please.
Mr. Castleberry,
Yes.
Mayor Heath,
Yes.
Mr. Hout,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Watson,
Yes.
Mr. Strayer,
Yes.
Mr. Gauss.
Yes.
Resolution adopted by unanimous vote.
Resolution R 21-075 is from the city clerk. It is a resolution to approve the renewal of the medical marijuana facilities permit application number RM 21-019 for Purple Valley Farms LLC. May I get a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move to adopt the resolution, Strayer.
Support. Roberts.
Are there any public comments? Are there any commissioner comments? I have a motion from Commissioner Strayer with a second from Commissioner Roberts. Roll call, please.
Mayor Heath,
Yes.
Commissioner Halt,
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts,
Yes.
Commissioner Watson,
Yes.
Commissioner Strayer,
Yes.
Commissioner Gauss,
Yes.
Commissioner Castleberry.
Yes.
Resolution adopted by unanimous vote.
Resolution R 21-076 is from the city clerk. It is a resolution to approve the renewal of the medical marijuana facilities permit application number RM 21-007 for WGL Industries LLC. May I get a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move to
Move
adopt
to-
the resolution. Watson.
Support Roberts.
Are there any public comments? Are there any commissioner comments? I have a motion from Commissioner Watson with a second from Commissioner Roberts. Roll call, please.
Halt,
Can you repeat that again?
Commissioner Halt,
Oh, yes.
Commissioner Roberts,
Yes.
Commissioner Watson,
Yes.
Commissioner Strayer,
Yes.
Commissioner Gauss,
Yes.
Commissioner Castleberry,
Yes.
Mayor Heath.
Yes.
Resolution adopted by unanimous vote.
Resolution R 21-077 is from the City Commission. It is a resolution to approve a stipend for the city administrator. May I get a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move to adopt the resolution. Strayer.
Second, Castleberry.
Are there any public comments?
Yes, Mayor, Commissioners, Don Taylor, 475 Meadowbrook Drive. I apologize, I didn't have a chance to look at this resolution to understand what the stipend is for. Can you explain that?
I will comment back that the stipend is for the community, because he's still doing the community development director job as well. And he had a stipend previous to this, but it expired a couple months ago.
Thank you very much.
Ken Tokars, 110 South Locust. I guess if you're going to approve this, I guess my understanding from one of the pre-meetings is that we only started looking for this position or posting for it, and the posting in the MML is as of, I think, this month. So if we haven't posted for this position, I don't think that the stipend should be applicable. I think it should be 6 months of when we started posting or actually looking for someone to fill this position. Thank you.
Hearing no more public comment, are there any commissioner comments?
Mayor, if I could.
Commissioner
I guess
Halt?
I'll kind of explain a little bit on where the stipend originally came from. The mayor, myself, and Commissioner Watson, initially, once Greg Elliott got the job, it was reported in Telegram that on August 19th, we actually approved it. So then after that, negotiations proceeded afterwards. I couldn't in good faith, because former Administrator Byrd left, I could not in good faith support paying an administrator with no experience the same as an Administrator Byrd, because when we hired Administrator Byrd, he had experience. Then, so I made those comments to our city administrator, Greg Elliott, during our meeting, and he made the point of, well, I'm gonna have to do two jobs. And okay, I understand that. Now, what's a good time frame for you to fill that job? It was, I can get it done in 6 months. Okay. So we agreed to bring to the commission what the $1,000 a month stipend into both jobs. So as we go through the process, again, I made it a good conscience that 6 months, if you can't find it, if you can't find a replacement for yourself, then that's not my problem anymore after that. So since then, starting in October, we had blight committee meetings and really good discussions with different cities, different mayors on how they combat blight. I myself kept pounding the table, and in that committee, first of all, was the mayor, myself, and Commissioner Strayer. I would constantly pound the table on who is the city commission going to hold accountable for the city commission's blight initiative. Who are we going to hold accountable? And again, so we finally got out of Greg in about November that it would be the community development director. Okay, I got an answer. Get to December, the job wasn't posted. Get to January, the job wasn't posted. And I made it very clear that it's not my problem after 6 months is up. Now, with that being said, if it was posted within the first month, I'd give some leniency here, right? Because the job market is tough. I deal with that in my business. We are severely shorthanded, but my managers know that it's a nationwide problem. So the job wasn't posted till after 4 months when we originally agreed to adopt his contract in the first place. In my eyes, in the private sector, that would never fly. Again, some commissioners may disagree because technically it's not your personal money. So $1,000, we got money in the bank, city's got a good fund balance, we'll go on and so forth. But in my opinion, I've always made a true commitment that I will always support and do things with taxpayer funds as I would my own. And so I do not support this. I'm actually kind of offended it's even on the agenda. But again, it's about building consensus, and if support is there, so be it. But this kind of thing, this kind of stuff never happens in the private sector. And I'm truly disappointed it's on there again. We're all dealing with this. The job market is tough, but the job wasn't posted till 4 months after we pretty much held his feet to the fire to post it. Now I see it, in the memo, it says based on if we hire somebody or reorganization. But in my opinion, Greg's in the captain's chair, and this is something he has to deal with. So again, I have a lot more sympathy if it was posted a couple weeks after the negotiation, the contract was executed, but it was literally 4.5 months. So again, consensus has to be built, but I don't support it. Again, I don't like the idea. It doesn't sit well with me that it's actually on here. I have to actually vote for it. But again, my opinion.
Mayor, if I may.
Go ahead, Commissioner Watson.
The component of it, I'm okay with it. I would like it to be close-ended though, so we can revisit it. Because right now it's until filled, because I mean, there could be a time where we need to reallocate those resources from that role to another role and just kind of call it quits or put it back burner or something along those lines. So I would be much more in favor to have that timeline in there so that we can revisit it, understanding that 1 month has already expired on what's proposed in there.
Commissioner Watson, that makes a lot of point, but to the grand scheme of things, I do believe former Administrator Nelson worked without a community development director for a decade.
Right, and Commissioner Hell, isn't that in violation of the charter? Isn't the charter specifically say we need a community development director? And that's why that position was loaded with Commissioner or with Administrator Byrd?
Now, it's a position, the city commission can fund any position we want, or we can take any position we want out outside of the 3 components when it comes to the administrator, the clerk, and the attorney. That's to my knowledge. But I don't believe it's required. Again, I'm not an attorney or a charter expert.
Right,
but
I'm just going from memory of when we did fill that spot and how that was a big win for the commission because it was something outlined in our charter. But I could be mistaken. I could be mistaken on that.
I agree that there's something we should look down the road for, but again, we gave him 6 months to fill it.
I'm
the
not
job
arguing
wasn't
that.
posted until after 4 months. So
I get it. Yeah, I'm not arguing that component of it, but I don't want this to be open-ended.
I agree.
And I don't want those duties to go completely ignored, regardless of the reasoning why we're at where we're at. Those need to be attended to, but there's got to be a horizon on it.
But it's kind of like when you have say like a salaried manager in a small business like myself. Somebody quits. The salaried manager's having a hard time finding trouble as it is now, like we are now. So that comes with the part of the deal. I mean, that's management. I mean, you got to work sometimes a little harder than what you maybe want to till you get that position filled. But we didn't even do that because we gave him 6 months.
That's true. I agree with that statement.
This is not a small business. This is a city government. And as a city administrator, we are somewhat responsible for maintaining the watch. And as Commissioner Watson said, I do not want to see this job go unfilled. I think Greg is doing all in what he can to maintain both roles. And it has been a couple months since he has received any compensation for that. I think it is important that we maintain that. I agree that we need to have we have to have a cap on that. But I would be appreciative of the city attorney to let us know what the charter says about that position, if it is needs to be maintained there or not.
Commissioner Castleberry, it's not part of the charter, but it is part of our city code that we have a community development director. The commission has the ability through the charter to create different department heads, administrative positions, and apparently that was done some time ago. And so it's in our city code that position exists, but it would not be a violation of the charter for it not to be filled, to answer Commissioner Watson's question. But yes, it is part of our city code.
And I stand corrected.
I agree that it can't be open-ended. I'm interested in what time frame we're saying. We did 6 months. We're going to do another 6 months. The resolution doesn't say how much the stipend is. I'm assuming that it was $1,000 before. It would be $1,000 again. But as difficult as it's been, you know, are we going to be back here 6 months from now having the same discussion? I mean, I know we're not going to let it be open-ended, but the difficulties that we've had, I think we've got 2 acceptable candidates in that time, one who decided not to accept an offer and one before us now. In a good and perfect world, this would be a fabulous applicant, and we could get it filled immediately. But I don't know whether that's going to be the case.
Okay, but then let the horizon be a matter of our own management tool, that we just don't let this slide forever and a day. And one, you know, I mean, we need to relieve Greg of these duties.
Yeah.
So he is focused on our administration. And if it takes us to use this as our reminder, so be it. But this discussion needs to happen. And I would rather see it, say a 3 month, just that it continues to come up and be fresh. And we ask the question of ourselves, especially since we just were reminded that this isn't a violation of our charter, that, you know, is this a role that we can find right now? Or is it some other way to deploy those assets? Because just sitting on a budget number, that's not benefiting anybody.
I agree. And I think 3 months is better than 6. So, you know, there's kind of that timer out there, or alarm clock, whatever you want to call it, that when it goes off 3 months from now, if the job's not filled, we got another discussion to have.
Correct.
Am I correct in assumption that the dollar amount would be the same as the last time?
It says continue to 1,000, so I think that's a fair assumption.
Okay, I'm snoozing over here.
What incentive, if it's not tied up, what incentive does the manager have to fill the position?
Well, we'll cut it off. We'll end the stipend.
Because it's not a small business, but sometimes when you deal with expenditures, you have to look at it like a small business. That's just how I look at it sometimes. And this is one of those cases. I don't, the comment about this is not a small business, is government, we're not giving incentive to fill the position unless we have, like Commissioner Watson, let's give a date that we can lock down. And I gave him 6 months, and I think he agreed that was long enough. And then it was 4 months down the road, it was not posted. That's what I struggle with. Not the importance of the position or the job, it's just the timeline of when it was posted. That's what I have an issue with.
Commissioners, just to be clear, we did post the job in January. So it's been posted since that time. Yeah, I did not ask to have this item placed on the agenda tonight, just to be clear. One of the commissioners asked that we place it on the agenda. Tried to write the resolution in such a way that once it's filled, or you make a decision about not filling the position, i.e. restructuring, then the stipend would end. Doesn't matter to me when you end it. We have an applicant that we're interviewing Wednesday of this week. So we're hopeful that that will be someone that we can recommend to you.
And I will say, I am the commissioner that requested Greg put this on the agenda because I think it's important that we value our workers and the work that they are doing. And this is a very important position. And I wanted Greg to spend some time making sure that the duties of that position were continuing. And I thought having that stipend continue would show him that we benefit or we support that the duties of the community development director position, and we feel it's important. So I guess it's to me, we're putting our money where our mouth is. And if we feel that the duties that fall under the community development director are important, then we need to pay for those duties, whoever is doing them. I have no problem with revisiting it in 3 months or whenever we want to put a time frame on, if we need to. I just think it is important. It's an important position, and we need to support it.
I guess, and this is with all due respect, I think everybody's talking like we haven't given them 6 months. And I want to incentivize the administrator to fill it. And so I supported it from day one. When Brad and Angie and I were in those negotiations, I supported it. But now we're talking about, and again, I understand the importance of the position. The timeline of action is what I bother with, and that does not fly in the private sector in good companies. And I'll go back to what Commissioner Casper said. It's not a small business, but we're talking about dollars and cents that essentially is not ours. I view it like that.
My concern is the fallout from not having the position. I know we didn't have it in the past, but there has been headway made in that position. And we have a position rolling in the right direction there. I don't want to let that go and there be fallout from that. I just built a conversation about blight and building our community back up, and that one of our biggest resources, our children, are leaving as they graduate or go to college. They're not coming back here. Our population is slimming instead of growing. And so a community development director will help grow our community. So I want to maintain the steam that we've achieved and move ahead. That's the difference between when I'm saying the fallout is then our community, not just ours personally and our small business.
I guess, help me understand how, and again, we're talking about $1,000 a month. This is strictly principle for me. Help me understand, Commissioner Casper, how not approving a $1,000 a month stipend reduces those efforts.
Because I want to make sure that those efforts are still maintained. And just like you brought up incentive, if we don't provide incentive to maintain those, then why would he maintain doing them?
Well, then if he doesn't maintain doing them, then we need a new city administrator. And I would hate.
So you're going to ask him to do 2 jobs with no pay for the second one?
He had 6 months. I mean,
I would like to weigh in on this. I was in the room when this was all discussed, and it was a very honest and frank discussion. Do you think you can fill this in 6 months? Like, do you think, now nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody knows if they can fill it in 6 months because it is a hard position to fill. I do understand that. But it was a very confident, and what was said, was, this is what's expected. Don't come back and ask for more money later, because we do expect that conversation did happen in that room. Don't come back and expect to ask for more money later. If it doesn't get filled, you're just gonna have to keep going until we find someone. Now, that being said, and seeing, how hard it has been to fill, I will say I was, very adamant on, not approving this stipend. I am more open, but it has to have a time frame. And here's my issue with that. So we say we're going to give 3 more months. We've already, so if we're going back, because we already owe now like 2 months back, is that 3 months starting from there, or is it going to be 5 months out, or is this going to begin now? And there isn't that back pay. I guess those are some things to figure out
Mayor,
as well.
per the resolution, it's April 1st. That's 1 month.
Yep, that's what I thought. So are you saying 3 months from that April 1st? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, it needs to be revisited end of June. I mean, it's active. It's been active this whole time. It needs to be revisited at the end of June.
That's what I was asking. I wanted to know where that 3 months was coming, because I'm feeling more comfortable with that, but what I don't want to see and what I am concerned with is this, keep getting revisited throughout. And I just want to make sure that we really are trying to fill this position and, and prioritizing that, which I do believe is happening. It's just really hard to find, qualified applicants. I understand that. I am disappointed at the length of time it took to advertise for the position. I don't know if it would have changed the outcome, to be perfectly honest with you, if we would have filled it in that time anyways. But I really feel it does need that it does need that time frame on there if I'm going to consider approving it myself, just because I think that needs to be there.
Okay, I mean, I would make a motion to revise that resolution, as I was stated, to end or be revisited at June 30th.
I'm really,
Commissioner Gray, are you willing to amend your motion or to that, or?
Would you like me to amend it so that we revisit it at the end of June?
By June 30th?
Fine.
I want to make a comment, and I'm trying to look at this thing objectively. And I'm conflicted because I don't know that the stipend is going to, first of all, I agree the administrator is doing 2 jobs, and I believe that he should be compensated for that. And I don't think he's got a lot of control over how the applications are coming in, other than I agree that I wish the job had been posted sooner. But on the other hand, and I'm going to bounce back and forth here, I'm not sure the stipend, I think the stipend is deserved for him doing 2 jobs, but I don't think it's going to help us attract candidate. And I don't believe that he's going to work any less hard to fill the job. The concern that I've got is if we find additional applicants, great. I don't want to settle for somebody out of desperation just to get a community development director. We need to hire a good person. Now, nobody likes to hear what I would have done in the past, but a stipend with a limited, June 30th, I could probably do that. But I think to help the administrator out in terms of actually attracting, or if we get a good candidate, maybe we ought to consider something like a higher end bonus for the candidate that we find. If there's somebody we really want to get on the team and they're, a little hesitant to do it because they live 25 miles too far, or they're not sure about Adrian or whatever, maybe we need to incentivize the higher end and make something happen that way. I'm just concerned that, we've had 2 candidates. I don't know how good the one that was going to be for us now and how that's going to work out with the interview. But if it's an iffy interview or if it's an iffy situation, I've looked at it. I'm bothered by some of the things, and I'll talk to you separately about that, Greg. And they're not serious, it's just concerns that I have. But if it's a mediocre candidate, that's not the kind of person we want. Not for the long term. We can't hire second and third tier applicants. We got to start hiring the best. And I mean, again, I've said it 3 times. I don't want to hire somebody who's just, substandard or out of desperation just to get somebody on board. So that for what it's worth.
Let me also say that by revisiting means we have this discussion again. It doesn't mean that the stipend automatically comes to an end, in my opinion. I also agree with Commissioner Gauss in that if we continue to have issues here, throwing out some sort of bonus, if we have some good candidates, could be a good way to go.
So is there a new motion on the table?
So this is, so this is what I put down, and see if you're all okay. A resolution to approve a stipend for the city administrator through June 30th, at which time it will be reevaluated. Are you, Ladd, or Commissioner Strayer, are you okay with that motion?
I'm okay with that motion.
Commissioner Castleberry, are you still okay to second that motion? We can't hear you. You're on mute.
Is that appropriate to do it that way?
Yes, because we're amending it.
Okay.
You don't have to second it if you don't want to second
it to June
the
30th.
amended motion. You would second it the first time, which is why I asked if you want to second the amended motion.
Yeah, so we're seconding it till June 30th. Is that correct?
Correct.
I'm seconding it till June 30th. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Okay, hearing no more commissioner comments. Resolution R21-077 from the City Commission is a resolution to approve a stipend for the city administrator through June 30th, at which time it will be reevaluated. The motion was from Commissioner Strayer with a second from Commissioner Castleberry. Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Watson,
Yes.
Mr. Strayer,
Yes.
Mr. Gauss,
Yes.
Mr. Castleberry,
Yes.
Mayor Heath,
Yes.
Mr. Hout,
No.
the resolution to approve a stipend for the city administrator through June 30th, at which time it will be reevaluated, was approved by 6 yes, 1 no vote.
At this time, it is time for public comment. Just to reiterate, there is a 3-minute time limit. And for the record, please state your name and address.
Hello, Joaquin Ramos. You've heard from me a couple of times now, but I've had an issue with a 3-minute time limit pretty much since it exists, since it was ever brought up. I understand you can't have things go on forever, but 3 minutes has always seemed a bit short to me, especially since people regularly cut off towards the end of it. So maybe 5 minutes would make more sense. But also, if we're going to have a time limit on public comments in the main meeting, I think we should have a limit on commissioner comments in the public meeting. This is why you have a pre-meeting to talk about things at length, no matter how long it might take, even do it again if needed. So I think you should consider having an end to commissioner comments at, say, like the 5-minute mark. This has happened a couple of times. I take notes on every meeting, and I could go back, and your meetings are recorded. There was a meeting where one of you took over 7 minutes. And of course, I can point to how disorderly this last like 15 minutes were. So thank you for your time. That's all I have at this moment.
Ken Tokars, 110 South Locust. I'm been employing the city on the Johnson Controls contract, and it's getting a little bit frustrating. My background, I was the energy specialist for Adrian Public Schools for approximately 3 years, where I oversaw the energy program and documented our savings that we were able to reduce our energy costs by 33%. The city entered into this $9.6 million contract with Johnson Controls, and then when you add in the interest, I think it comes up to about $13.4 million. And the whole plan was to save money, and the money from that savings would fund other energy saving projects. One of the items that's listed in the contract is measurement and verification. And I keep getting my FOIA response back that tells me something about water meters. In layman terms, for maybe everybody listening, if you have a combined gas, water, and electric bill, and let's just say it's $500 a month, and the snake oil salesman comes to your house and says, hey, I'm going to put in a turbulator, and this turbulator is going to cut your energy costs of $500 a month down to $250 a month. I'm going to go through and I'm going to make sure that once he puts that turbulator in, that I'm saving that $250 a month, or I'm not going to pay him. Right now, the information I've gotten back from the FOIA says that measurement and verification is only going to take place with the Johnson Control contract for 3 years. I believe it's a 30 or a 20-year program. So and the payments escalate. They start out small and they escalate. So there's no measurement or verification going on. And I FOIA this information and no one can give me this information. I'm hoping that sometime in the near future, you could bring someone from Johnson Controls, and to be more transparent, you could tell the citizens and put something on the website. Okay, the city of Adrian spent $420,000 last year in utility bills. We entered into the Johnson Controls project, and now our annual utility bills are $350,000. So we can document and verify that we're actually saving the money that they're going to save. Because then what's going to happen 10 years from now when we have a whole set of different commissioners, we're still in the same program, and the snake oil salesman
Is up. Sorry, Mr. Kopars, your time is up.
Scott Marvin, Sand Creek Highway. I'm concerned about the stabbings and shootings that have occurred in the last few weeks, the last 10 days actually, in the city. Safety is very important to me, and I hope we have enough police to investigate these situations. I wonder why these are happening so much. I do know that in the summer, our community has more crime than in the winter. I think these stabbings and shootings should be reported in the newspaper. Please keep us safe. If you see something, say something. I hope Adrian Police Department will be fully staffed soon, and also the cameras Chief Emmerich requested at the pre-meeting. Thanks so much. Have a good evening.
Hearing no more public comment, are there any commissioner comments? Hearing no commissioner comments, may I get a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn, Watson.
Support help.
I have a motion from Commissioner Watson with a second from Commissioner Halt. All in favor, say aye.
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 Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.